Welcome back to the League of Women Voters of Acton-Stowe's Candidates Forum. This section will be the questions that each candidate will ask each other. We will start with John Loring. John?
Pam, during one of the early debates, the question was asked, how would you reduce the budget? And you answered by saying that what you would do was increase the pay of all the state employees to reduce the number of people that leave state employment and therefore reduce training costs. Do you have any idea of what kind of dollars that would cost, and do you really believe that that would work to cut the state budget?
That was one small part of a total answer to a question, and I mentioned several other areas there are inefficiencies, but one of the areas that I talked about that I had observed in working with state agencies was the amount of time and effort and money that goes into training new people and the amount of waste that we have due to the fact that there is such a high turnover rate, particularly in some of the technical people in DEQE, which is the area I had observed the most closely. So that my concern is that we need to provide a structure that will hold those people so that we don't have to waste that money on continual training and on the inability of those people to work to do their job for a time period that is a waste. Therefore, I do feel that we have got to look into building those incentives to keep people in the state employment. And I realize that the simple answer that John just gave would not be a great savings. In fact, there would be some initial increase in cost. But in overall, unless this is attended to, we will continue to spend money at the state level that totally goes to a wasted effort of just replacing people and training and of having people ineffective.
John, you now have a question for Maureen.
I'd like to ask Maureen, in the years that I've been in the legislature, I think I've seen two independent Democrats, or two independents win election. And when we were sworn in January 3rd, by January 5th, they had assigned themselves to the Democratic Party. Aren't you really just a Democrat running as an independent, and will be joining the Democratic caucus the day after you get in the legislature?
Well, John, an independent elected, as you know, there have been more than two. And an independent elected to the legislature has a choice, a number of different options. One, they can remain independent. Two, they can join the Democratic caucus, or they can join the Republican caucus. That's a decision for November 9th. Am I a Democrat running as an independent? I was a Democrat all my life since I was 18 years old. And I was going to run in the Democratic primary. I didn't believe in 150 people choosing a Democratic nominee. And I didn't believe in adhering to a particular slate of positions just to get elected. I'm an independent because I'm very independent-minded. I take a look at each issue independent of political pressures, lobbyists, union people, or whatever the pressures may be. I think we need a lot more independence. There are a lot of independent thinkers in the state legislature, Democrats and Republicans. Because you adhere to a particular party and you have a letter next to your name does not categorize you as being independent-minded or one that is going to kowtow to the leadership. I promise you I am not the person that's going to kowtow to the leadership. I'm going to represent this district fairly. I'm going to listen to the people in the district, the 35,000 people in this district, and not the lobbyists and pressure groups that seem to put pressure on people, particularly running in a primary. I'd also quickly like to address the issue of the budget. And that is because it has a lot to do with being independent-minded. If you're going to adhere to the governor's 8.3% revenue projections, even though most credible economic sources know that it's not true, that Pam Reeser has done, I give her an A for loyalty to the Democratic Party. However, any credible source, anybody who understands a budget knows, A, 8.3% revenue projections were predicated on a 20% growth in the last quarter. That has never happened. We have never had a greater than 17% growth in the last quarter. B, you don't raise salaries to cut the budget. That is something that I'm glad that John brought up. I think that Pam's approach to budgetary matters is absurd. Thank you.
Pam, we now have, you may ask a question of either John or Maureen.
Yes, John, you have claimed in some of your ads that you are offering creative solutions to the challenges of maintaining environmental quality of life. John, I'd like you to substantiate that claim. Tell us when you authored, filed, sponsored, and testified before a committee and carried to the floor any piece of creative environmental legislation. Name the present Commissioner of the DEQE and our Regional Director, and when did you last meet with either of them to pursue an environmental issue for this region? And for that matter, when did you last speak to the Board of Selectmen or before town meeting on an environmental issue?
That's a tough question. You've asked for a whole legislative history in about a minute and a half. I haven't spoken before town meeting on environmental issues because I've always tried to maintain a philosophy that it's not my place as a state representative to interfere in local affairs and be involved except where it has an environmental impact. And when you ask me that question right out point blank, who is the Commissioner of DEQE, I'm not quite sure. I don't know, as a matter of fact, at this point. But you asked when the last time I spoke to anybody at DEQE or DEM or in an environmental question. I was heavily involved in and this was primarily telephone conversation and discussion with people at DEM on the question of the Sperry land at White's Pond. There was a very serious consideration by DEM to purchase that land, to turn it into a sandy beach, make a recreational area of some kind on that property. And I intervened and discussed the situation with them and discussed the situation with people who live around White's Pond, and they became convinced or made the determination that they would not purchase the land around White's Pond. I think it's now owned by a private developer, and there may be some serious problems with that. But the concern about developing a recreational area on that end of White's Pond was very serious to the people of Concord, and particularly people in that area. And I think I was a major impact in reducing that possibility.
Pam, you have a question for Maureen?
Yes, Maureen.
Yes.
We have no clues as to how you will lead. You have no record of leadership to judge. In fact, we find you have no record of having completed some of the degree work and things, so that we have no idea what your background is. You know that you have the ability to provide accounting and state financial record and would make a good financial advisor to the state. We don't even know which party you'll choose next. You started as a Democrat, you're running as an independent to avoid the primary, and you ran a sticker campaign as a Republican. Why should we vote for you when you're changing all the time? And what party affiliation will you take on November 9th, the day you have set as your day of revelation? Could you please give us specifics on these qualifications
Sure.
and on your party affiliation?
I'm glad to hear that Pam's considering voting for me, wants to know why she should. A lot of people have asked, you go back into records. I come from the private sector. I worked for 5 years as a logistics planner and manager. I managed a $20 million inventory budget, and I managed personnel up and down the East Coast. I didn't join an awful lot of groups in that time. I went to school evenings. I'm still working on my degree. I was a member of the Finance Committee and still am. And I don't think that a joiner is necessarily an indicator of a leader. This campaign has been spent on a number of issues, and I think I provided a lot of leadership on those issues. In fact, I ran a sticker campaign against John Loring in a successful attempt to raise the issue of comprehensive building permits, one which neither of my opponents really wanted to talk about because they knew they were on the wrong side of it. That kind of leadership is something that I intend to continue in the State House. And again, I'm really glad to hear that Pam understands that I have a better grasp on fiscal matters than she does. I agree with that. I think it's very important in the State House because the priorities are driven by the budget, and the budget drives priorities. And one has to have a good handle on how can you propose programs when there isn't enough money to cover what we have now. And you need to be able to look at that from a management perspective and understand where you're going to tighten up controls and where you're going to cut. And I put together a good, solid proposal for that, which I'd continue in the State House. Leadership is not indicated by how many groups you've joined. It's indicated by what you've done and how you've conducted your campaign. I've conducted my campaign honestly. I've stuck to the issues consistently. I put forth my proposals. I've written position papers. And I continue to do that as a state representative.
Thank you, Maureen. Now you have 2 questions,
Yes.
one for Pam and one for John.
I'd like to start with Mr. Loring first. He's the incumbent. And I'd like to refer to an ad in the newspaper, political advertisement in the Beacon 2 weeks ago, in which Mr. Loring said that during the next year alone, John Loring could save you on the average $100 in your car insurance premiums. And I found that to be very interesting. I support the Senate bill that was just recently passed on auto insurance, and I support taking back rolling reconciliation and the other key provisions that are in the Senate version of the bill. My question to you, Mr. Loring, is auto insurance in Massachusetts is deplorable. People are paying hundreds of dollars more than they should be. You recently ran an ad in the local paper saying that your insurance reform bill was recently adopted by the House. However, it is my understanding that your bill died in committee. The bill that was now on the floor of the House came out of the Insurance Committee, one that you are not on, Mr. Loring. Furthermore, you voted against 2 key provisions in the House bill that represent $100 million in savings to the consumer, specifically authorizing direct payment to consumers for repairs and creating an optional deductible for glass. I asked, why would a legislator vote against 2 key provisions that represent $100 million in savings to the consumer in auto insurance premiums? I was told by one of your colleagues, Mr. Loring, that the only reason for a legislator to vote against these provisions was if, and I quote, the auto body shops and glass people got to him. Mr. Loring, is there another explanation for why you would vote against these 2 key provisions in the auto insurance reform package?
Well, I think that you have to recognize that when we're putting together an insurance reform bill, it becomes very complicated and very difficult. I talk to auto body people, I talk to insurance people, I talk to consumers, and the form of the paying directly to consumers rather than paying to auto body shops in the original bill was quite different from the bill that I helped co-sponsored with the Republican Party. We did file a bill, parts of which were ultimately incorporated in the Senate bill, which just came out and is now in conference committee and hopefully will be passed within the next week or 2. The bill that came out of the Senate finally has incorporated many of the things that we asked for in our Republican package and many of the things that are in the insurance reform package that came out of the House. The conference committee has to thrash out those differences. The auto body shop is a major problem, and it's a major problem for a lot of people, the payment of auto body shops. Something will be in the bill, and I hope that it's one that does pay the consumers directly. I think with education and understanding of legislation as it's filed in the legislature, we ought to have the opportunity to change our minds once in a while, or at least change our point of view on the basis of information developed during the dialogue and discussion and debate of any issue. There's no issue that the title is the bill. The contents of a bill are very much different from the title. Auto insurance reform can take many, many different forms.
Maureen, you have a question for Pam.
Yes, Pam. All summer long, you have been defending the governor's revenue projections of 8.3%. You seem to be one of a small group of people who believe the budget is balanced. You've shown a remarkable willingness to go along with the party line and union lobbyists in support of prevailing wage. And you believe that bureaucrats on Beacon Hill can make better zoning decisions than can our own town government. Pam, what do you say to the charge that as a legislator, you would go along with whatever the Democratic leadership decided?
I refute that charge, and I want to go back and say I also would not vote for Maureen Finlayson because she has no record on which to base it, and she is totally a one-issue person, and that is the financial. Secondly, I have said that I thought we would balance out, that we would reach a stable position in terms of that 8.3. She is correct. We will not reach the 8.3 overall, but I believe we have stabilized after last year's fiscal crisis, and that we will have a shortfall again this year, but that we are back up and we will not have it in the continuing years. And I think that the Standard & Poor rating reflects that fact, that we have a strong economy in this state and will continue to have so. In terms of my position on comprehensive permit, I gave it later. I believe it does need some changes, but I believe that basically it has served the communities well and the housing authorities in developing elderly housing, and it will continue to serve us in meeting the needs for affordable housing. And the final issue that she brought up was prevailing wage. And there too, from the beginning, I have said the prevailing wage has problems, but that throwing out is not going to either help the communities because the money will not come back to the communities. And I believe that we need to look at the entire bidding process and redesign it, change the areas upon which the prevailing wage is based, that I believe we need to look carefully at the entire package and not just select out this one part of it and get rid of it. It is our only way of implementing the of making sure that hiring processes are fair and that people are hiring different minority groups and women, and I believe that it stands on as a valuable piece of legislation. 34 other states have it. The federal government holds the prevailing wage. I think we need to correct it but not throw it out.
Thank you very much, candidates. This ends this question session, but we will be right back after a short break when the candidates will give you their closing statements. Stay tuned, please. We will now continue with the final segment of the League of Women Voters Candidates Forum. We will start with Pam Rezor. Pam, your closing statement.
Who will best lead Acton, Concord, and Carlisle and the Commonwealth into the 1990s? That's the question that you have to answer in the next week. Your choice on November 8th is important. Which of the three candidates you have heard tonight will be most effective? Effectiveness, leadership, distinctive record. These are not the words that the incumbent's fellow legislators have used regularly to describe his performance. These words appear only in his own claims. Voters, you and I know that claims are not how we judge a legislator. It is by his works. The incumbent urges voters to elect him because he represents the minority party. But he has not been effective in opposing things that should not be done, as well as accomplishing things. John, when did you ever rally the opposition? The incumbent isn't sure whether this race is just another minor challenge or the most important race in his career. But we know it's not enough to meet the needs of the 1990s just to be an occupant. The district needs a committed, effective leader, an advocate with a proven record of accomplishment. Maureen, you have given us no record of leadership, no record of accomplishment by which to judge your effectiveness. The 14th Middlesex District needs a leader who will make the right choices, not follow either party line. I am confident that the voters in this district seek leadership they can be proud of. I am confident that the voters in this district want to be on the forefront, leading the state into the 1990s. Providing child care, affordable housing, home health care, long-term care for the elderly. I am confident that the voters of this district will choose me, Pam Reeser, to lead them into the 1990s. Providing these services, providing the kind of advocacy that this district needs to meet its problems in terms of traffic congestion, in terms of growth and development. I am confident that together we can make things happen. Concord, Acton, and Carlisle join me now in working for our Commonwealth.
Maureen?
Thank you. Touched on several issues here tonight, but I'd like to talk for a minute about myself personally. I'm married with a family. My husband Richard and my son Jonathan are home watching tonight. While campaigning for the last 9 months, I've met hundreds of people like myself and my husband. People working in the private sector, supporting families who care a great deal about the issues that are the focus of my campaign. Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike are concerned about the need for quality, affordable daycare, clean water for their children, and home health care for themselves and for their parents. I'm running as an independent because I believe what we need now is an independent voice in the state legislature, one not tied by party politics to one full slate of positions or another, but one that's dedicated to finding the best bipartisan solutions for the issues that most affect our quality of life here in Acton, Concord, and Carlisle, and the quality of life for our children. The voters in this district are among the most sophisticated in Massachusetts, and I have sought to reflect those standards. I believe the voters in this district place a value on sound fiscal judgment. As you look at the three candidates before you and view them in terms of what they will bring to the State House, I ask for your vote on November 8th. And I thank you for listening here tonight.
John?
Thank you very much. I'd first like to thank the League for making this debate possible. Very difficult for me because obviously I'm the one that has the record. I'm the one that has the record that can be attacked. And to be attacked the way I have, I think it's rather unfortunate that the candidates opposing me have chosen to attack and ask questions of me that are impossible to answer off the top of your head with 14 years of service and perhaps 10,000 roll calls and attending 90% of them. And it's rather interesting that Maureen finds one day that I missed in the House of, I think it was a week. I took a week's vacation, believe it or not. And 1 week I was not in the State House, and she dug that one out, and it shows that I never was in the State House for the last 14 years by 1 week's missing a couple of votes. I think it's rather unfortunate that the campaign has turned into an attack, and I think it's unfortunate that the press has chosen to report the campaign on the basis of letters to the editor, which are self-serving and directed by the candidate's own people, rather than my letters to the editor obviously were self-serving as I could make them for me. But I tried to make them gentle and to explain the record, my record as I see it, not to attack my opponent who has no record to attack. 6 years on the Board of Selectmen, I didn't even know she was there. She claims to be so, this is Pam Reeser, claims to be so effective as a great debater that she presented the Land Bank town meeting article on 2 occasions at the town meeting, and it lost both times. So I don't know how she's going to carry that kind of oratory effectiveness to the legislature and be a great success when she can't even convince her own townspeople that Land Bank ought to be adopted. Accuses me of voting against the land bank? Yes, I voted against the early House bill on the land bank because it had no local option. It came up 2 more times, and I voted for it when it was a House bill with a much higher number. In other words, a rewritten bill, and therefore it did have the local option in it, and I voted for it twice, and I will continue to vote for it. I sure hope that you will consider me again to serve you for my 8th term in the Massachusetts legislature and serve you as well, if not better, than I have in the past. Thank you very much.
We thank Maureen Finlayson, Independent, John Loring, Republican, and Pam Rezor, Democrat, for appearing and speaking to you this evening on the issues. We urge you to vote on November 8th, and please remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. Good evening.